A millionaire's daughter saw bruises on the nanny's arm during dinner. She asked her father what had happened. He ignored it until he received a drawing with a request for help. What he did next is simply shocking. Before you listen to this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories. The Allianz mansion was a monument to opulence, situated at the highest point of an elegant neighborhood of the capital. Its marble walls and impeccable gardens seemed to promise that there, in that refuge of the privileged, sadness would never dare to enter. Rafael Allianz, a renowned businessman and owner of one of the largest corporations in the country, was the perfect host on that special night. The main halls sparkled under the brilliance of crystal chandeliers. Glasses clinked as impeccably uniformed waiters circulated among the guests with silver trays. The air was filled with the scent of expensive perfumes and French champagne. Rafael had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal, the kind that made headlines in the financial newspapers and significantly increased the value of his company's shares. "Ladies and gentlemen, a toast to the future." Rafael raised his glass, flashing a carefully rehearsed smile. His tailored Italian suit accentuated his imposing figure as he dominated all the spotlights. Applause echoed throughout the room. Businessmen, celebrities, and important politicians approached him to congratulate him. Rafael was a man accustomed to winning, to conquering, to expanding his domains. From a young age, he had learned to transform opportunities into fortunes, and now, at 45, he was reaping the rewards of an impeccable career, at least in the eyes of the world. In a far corner of the room, watching all the activity with curious eyes, sat Olivia, Rafael's 10-year-old daughter. Dressed in a light blue dress that accentuated her eyes, the girl remained silent, absorbing her surroundings with a sensitivity that did not suit her age. While the adults talked about stocks, investments, and luxury travel, Olivia noticed details that went unnoticed by others. It was then that she saw Helena, her nanny, pouring herself juice from a crystal jug. Helena always had a kind smile and a warm word, but tonight she seemed different. Her movements were more restrained, almost cautious. When she raised her arm to pour herself a drink, the sleeve of her blouse slipped, revealing purple marks that disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. Olivia frowned. Something was wrong. Helena never talked about her personal life, but she always exuded joy and tranquility. That night, however, there was a weight in her gestures, a shadow in her gaze. The girl waited for Helena to come closer so she could serve her the juice. "Are you okay, Helena?" he asked softly, as the nanny leaned over. Helena forced a smile, but her eyes did not follow the movement of her lips. "So be it, my dear, why shouldn't it be?" "Your arm," Olivia began to say, but was interrupted by the approach of a tall man with a stern expression. "Helena, Mrs. Lyman is looking for more champagne at table 3, said Marco, the mansion's head concierge. His voice was refined, but there was something in his tone that made Helena straighten up immediately. "I'm leaving," Helena replied, almost in a whisper, avoiding Marco's gaze. Olivia watched the interaction with growing discomfort. Marco had worked for her father for years and managed the entire household with unquestionable efficiency. Rafael often praised him for keeping everything running smoothly, never bothering him with domestic problems. But there was something about the way Marco looked at Helena that gave Olivia a strange feeling. Determined, the girl crossed the aisle towards her father, who was chatting animatedly with Theo Muller, his older partner. "Father," he called, pulling the sleeve of his jacket slightly. Rafael turned to her with a distant smile, the kind reserved for inevitable interruptions. "What's up, princess? We're talking business." "Why is Helena hurt?" he asked bluntly. The smile on Rafael's face faltered for a moment. "What are you talking about, Olivia?" "She has purple marks on her arm. She looks sad." Theo Muller cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. Rafael let out a short, forced laugh. "Honey, Helena probably got a bump on her arm somewhere. Grown-ups get hurt sometimes too. Now, why don't you eat more of that pudding you like? Theo and I need to finish our conversation." Olivia hesitated, but her father's gaze left no room for insistence. Dejected, she slowly walked away. In the distance, she saw Helena carrying a heavy tray, while Marco supervised the other employees, following the nanny's every move with his gaze. The party continued well into the night. Speeches were made, agreements were struck, Laughter was exchanged. The adult world revolved in its own orbit, oblivious to the subtle observations of a sensitive little girl. But when all the guests finally retired, and the mansion fell into the silence of the early morning, Olivia lay awake in her room decorated with fluorescent stars on the ceiling. While her father was putting the finishing touches on the evening with Marco in the office, she grabbed her colored pens and a sheet of paper. With the concentration typical of childhood, she began to draw. First a female figure with long hair. Then, with the dark blue pencil, she colored part of the figure's arm. Finally, she wrote in large, colorful letters, "Someone needs to help her." Downstairs, Raphael was signing the final documents related to the big contract. Marco was presenting the detailed report of the event, assuring everyone that everything had gone according to plan. "Excellent work as always, Marco. I don't know what this house would be without you," Raphael commented, without looking up from the papers. "I'm just doing my job, sir," Marco replied with a slight smile of satisfaction. "I make sure everything and everyone is in its place." Raphael nodded, distracted. In her room, Olivia finally fell asleep, but not before carefully placing the drawing on the bedside table, where she knew the first person to see it in the morning would be Helena when she came to wake her up for breakfast. What no one in that mansion could have foreseen was that simple drawing, born from the pure perception of a child, would be the first thread that would be pulled into a tangle of secrets, fears, and truths long buried under the cloak of opulence and power. The sun had barely risen when Helena quietly entered Olivia's room as she did every morning. The nanny moved carefully around the room, decorated in pastels and stuffed animals, her impeccably pressed uniform contrasting with the obvious tiredness in her eyes. "Good morning, little one," he whispered, opening the curtains slightly to let the soft morning light illuminate the room. Olivia stirred in bed, still sleepy, but a smile appeared on her lips when she saw Helena. It was then that the nanny noticed the drawing on the bedside table. She picked it up with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the colored lines and the message written in a childish hand. Her face turned pale. "You saw it, didn't you?" Helena asked softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Olivia nodded, sitting up and hugging her knees. "Why are you hurt, Helena? Did Marco do it?" Helena hesitated, biting her lower lip. Her eyes filled with humor, but she quickly composed herself. "Sometimes adults have complicated problems, my dear, but it's nothing to worry about. Dad can help. He solves everything," Olivia declared, with the unwavering conviction that only children have. Helena smiled sadly. "Your father is a very busy man. Some things—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Some things are too small for men as important as him." Before they could continue their conversation, firm footsteps echoed down the hallway. Helena quickly folded the drawing and put it in her uniform pocket, getting up just as Raphael appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a smart suit, ready for another day of business success. "Good morning, Princess," he said, entering the room. His eyes briefly passed over Helena, who looked down. "I have an idea. How about we have lunch together today? Just the two of us, at that Italian restaurant you like." Olivia's face lit up. Moments alone with her father were precious rarity in their routine. "Can I bring my new drawings to show you?" he asked, already jumping out of bed. Raphael glanced quickly at his gold wristwatch. "That's it. I have a meeting now, but Helena will drop you off at the office at 12:30, right?" He looked at the nanny, who nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." "Perfect." Raphael gave his daughter a quick kiss on the forehead and left the room, already talking on the phone about some urgent business matter. Helena helped Olivia get dressed for school, combing her hair with delicate movements. However, the girl couldn't help but notice how the nanny trembled when she raised her arm. At breakfast, Olivia observed the dynamics of the house with new eyes. Marco walked among the employees like a general inspecting the troops, correcting the position of the cutlery, adjusting the angles of the chairs, always with a stern look that only softened when Raphael approached. "A special breakfast for you, miss," said Chiara, the cook, as she placed pancakes decorated with fresh fruit in front of Olivia. "Made with lots of love." Olivia thanked him, but her attention was fixed on Helena, who remained standing near the door, as if they were avoiding taking up any central space in the room. Marco approached her, whispering something that instantly made the nanny's smile disappear. After finishing her coffee, Helena walked Olivia to the car that would take her to school. As they said goodbye, the girl hugged her tightly, staying longer than usual. "I'll talk to Dad today," she whispered. "He'll help you." Helena stepped back gently, her eyes reflecting a mixture of tenderness and apprehension. "Olivia, please don't do this. Promise me." But determination was already planted in the girl's heart. In the back seat of the luxury car taking her to the elite school, Olivia opened her backpack and took out a new sketchbook. This time she drew her father, herself, and Helena, all holding hands, with a big red X over the figure of Marco, who was watching from a distance. Next to it she wrote, "Marco is mean to Helena." Olivia remained unusually quiet in class all morning. Her teacher, Agnes, noticed the change in the normally lively girl. "Everything okay, Olivia?" he asked during the playground, bending down to get to the girl's height. Olivia hesitated. "Agnes, if someone is hurting someone, what should we do?" The professor frowned, suddenly alert. "Well, we should help this person. Tell someone who can protect them." "Why do you ask that?" "It's just a question," Olivia replied, shuffling her feet. "If the person suffering is strong and everyone is afraid of them, who will help them?" Agnes gently touched the girl's shoulder. "Brave people, Olivia. People who know that the right thing to do is to protect those who are suffering even when it's hard." The words echoed in Olivia's mind for the rest of the morning. When the clock finally struck noon, her heart pounded. It was time to meet her father for lunch, as they had promised. Helena was waiting for her at the school gate, punctual as always. Together they walked to the imposing building that housed the headquarters of the Allianz companies. On the way, Olivia noticed that Helena seemed more tense than usual. "Are you afraid I'll tell Dad?" he asked directly. Helena sighed. "Olivia, some situations are too complicated for children to understand. Mark is important to his father. He keeps the house running smoothly. But it hurts you. Life is unfair sometimes, my dear. I have learned to deal with it." Olivia crossed her arms stubbornly. "It's not fair, and Dad wouldn't like to know." They arrived at the glass building that reflected the blue sky of the capital. Uniformed security guards opened the doors for them and immediately recognized the boss's daughter. In the panoramic elevator, as they ascended to the 30th floor, Olivia took out of her backpack the drawing she had done at school. "I did it for the Pope," he said, showing it to Helena, who paled at the clear representation of what was happening. "Olivia, please think carefully." The elevator doors opened on the presidential floor. Rose, Raphael's secretary, greeted them with a professional smile. "Miss Olivia, your father is finishing an important call. Could you wait a few minutes?" Olivia nodded and sat down next to Helena in the waiting room. The tension between them was palpable. Through the glass walls they could see Raphael standing in his office, gesturing as he spoke on the phone. His expression was serious, focused, the face of a man carrying the weight of empires on his shoulders. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity to Olivia, Raphael opened the office door and smiled when he saw his daughter. "My princess has arrived, ready for our special lunch." Olivia ran to hug him, but she didn't let go of the sheet of paper she was holding tightly. "Father, I have to show you something very important," he said, glancing briefly at Helena, who remained standing, tense, near the reception desk. Raphael adjusted his tie, discreetly checking his watch. "Can we meet at the restaurant? I made a reservation and we don't want to be late." "It's important," Olivia insisted, offering him the drawing. "It's about Helena." Raphael picked up the paper, his eyes quickly scanning the colorful figures. His smile wavered. "What's this, Olivia? Why did you draw Marco like that?" Helena took a step forward, clearly nervous. "Sir, I can explain. Olivia just—" "Marco is mean to Helena," Olivia interrupted with typical childish frankness. "He's hurting her. I saw the purple marks on his arm yesterday." The silence that followed was thick, full of tension. Raphael looked at the drawing from Helena and then at his daughter. For a moment, something seemed to change in his eyes, perhaps a glimmer of awareness, but soon he folded the paper and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. "Let's go to lunch, Olivia. We'll talk about it later," he said, in a tone that didn't intend any argument. Turning to Helena, he added, "You can go back to the mansion. I'll take Olivia home after lunch." As she left the office, Olivia looked back. Helena remained motionless, like a statue, her face a mask of fear and resignation. And at that moment, Despite her young age, the girl understood that there was much more at stake than her childish drawing could express. The Italian restaurant was an oasis of calm amidst the chaos of the business center. With soft lighting and tables strategically positioned to ensure privacy, it was the perfect retreat for executives who needed to discuss business away from prying ears. That day, however, Raphael had chosen the place to have lunch with his daughter, a rare occurrence in his busy schedule. Seated at a table in the back, father and daughter formed a curious contrast. Raphael, imposing in his tailored suit, discreetly checked his mobile phone while Olivia played with a cloth napkin, folding it into improvised shapes. "What do you want to eat, princess?" Raphael asked, finally putting the device away. "Pasta with white sauce," Olivia replied without looking up. After a moment of silence, she added, "You're not going to talk about my drawing." Raphael sighed, running his hand through his perfectly combed hair. "Olivia, I know you really like Helena, but sometimes children misinterpret things from adults." "I'm not misinterpreting things," the girl protested, looking up with a firmness that surprised her father. "I saw the marks on his arm, and he acts different when Marco is around, like he's afraid." The waiter approached to take the orders, momentarily interrupting the conversation. As he walked away, Raphael leaned across the table, adopting the tone he used in delicate negotiations. "Honey, Marco has worked for our family for over 10 years. He manages the house perfectly, so I can concentrate on the business. I'm sure everything you've seen has a simple explanation." "Then why don't you ask Helena?" Olivia challenged. "Because—" Raphael hesitated, not used to being questioned, especially by his 10-year-old daughter. "Because I have a company to run, contracts to supervise, hundreds of employees who depend on me. I can't get involved in domestic misunderstandings." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "Helena takes care of me every day. She's good to me. If someone hurts her, it's not fair to pretend we don't know." His daughter's words hit Raphael like an unexpected blow. Behind the facade of a ruthless businessman, something stirred in his heart. He remembered Helena's expression earlier, when Olivia had mentioned the marks. It had not been one of surprise or denial, but one of resignation. "I promise I'll keep an eye on the situation," he said finally, touching his daughter's small hand on the table. "If there's anything wrong, I'll fix it. Are you satisfied?" Olivia nodded, though her eyes betrayed that she expected more than vague promises. Lunch was filled with light-hearted conversation about Olivia's school and friends. Raphael made a sincere effort to connect with his daughter, realizing, not without a twinge of guilt, how little he knew about her daily life. Who were her favorite teachers? What subjects did she enjoy the most? Simple questions for which he had no preconceived answers. Returning to the mansion in the early afternoon, Raphael decided to do something unusual. He fired his driver and decided to stay home for the rest of the day. He told his advisors that he had a headache, cancelled 2 meetings, and settled into his personal office, from where he could observe, through the large windows, the activity in the property's gardens. That's how he saw Helena sitting on a bench under an old tree, reading a book while she waited to pick Olivia up from ballet class. There was something about the nanny's demeanor, a kind of quiet dignity, that intrigued him. Helena had worked at the mansion for almost 3 years, since the old housekeeper retired. She was competent, discreet, and adored by Olivia. How had she never noticed the details that her daughter had noticed immediately? His thoughts were interrupted by the entrance of Marco, who knocked lightly on the door before entering with a folder of documents. "Excuse me, sir. I didn't expect to find you at home this afternoon. I brought the monthly expense reports for your approval." Raphael observed the janitor with new eyes. Marco had always been the personification of efficiency, tall, with an erect posture, and a penetrating gaze that seemed to register every detail. He treated the other employees firmly, but he had always shown absolute respect for Raphael. "Marco, sit down," Raphael said, pointing to the chair in front of him. "I want to talk to you about something." The janitor obeyed immediately, placing his hands in his lap in an attentive posture. "How is Helena?" Raphael asked, carefully observing the man's reaction. A slight arch of an eyebrow was the only sign of surprise. "Helena? The nanny? As far as I know, she is fulfilling her duties adequately." "I didn't ask him about his duties. I asked him how he was." Mark adjusted his stance slightly. "I don't understand the nature of your question, sir. The employees are all fine, under proper supervision. Raphael drummed his fingers on the table, thoughtful. Olivia mentioned seeing marks on Helena's arm. Do you know anything about them? A tense silence hung in the air for a few seconds. Mark maintained his impassive expression, but his eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. Miss Olivia has a very fertile imagination, sir. Perhaps she mistook shadows or simply misinterpreted something she saw. Helena is quite clumsy sometimes. Just last week I warned her not to break a teacup from the French collection. Raphael nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off the concierge's face. I understand. In any case, I'd like to speak to Helena personally. Could you ask her to come to my office before I pick up Olivia from the ballet? Certainly, sir. Marco stood up, with movements as precise as ever. He turned to the door. Anything else, sir? No, Marco. That's all for now. When the door closed, Raphael leaned back in his chair, uneasy. The conversation had sounded strange somehow. There was something about the way Marco had spoken about Helena, with a calculated detachment, an underlying coldness, or maybe it was just his imagination, influenced by Olivia's concerns. An hour later, a soft knock on the door announced Helena's arrival. She entered timidly, pausing near the door, as if preparing for a quick retreat. Did you call me, sir? Yes, Helena. Please take a seat. Raphael pointed to the chair in front of him, the same one where Marco had been sitting earlier. Helena obeyed, though the tension was visible in the way she held her hands tightly in her lap, her knuckles almost white from the pressure. Helena has been working with us for almost 3 years. Olivia adores her. In fact, I've never seen her so attached to anyone since... Raphael broke off, avoiding mentioning Olivia's mother's absence, a subject he rarely broached. However, she has always proven to be reliable and dedicated. Thank you, sir, Helena murmured, still not fully looking up. Olivia is worried about you, Raphael continued, deciding to get straight to the point. She says she saw marks on your arm. Do you have some kind of problem that she should know about? Helena paled visibly, and her eyes finally met Raphael's, which were wide open in alarm. No, sir, it's no problem. I must have hit my arm somewhere and didn't even realize it. Children have very active imaginations. His words came out hastily, over-rehearsed. Raphael watched as she instinctively lifted the sleeve of her blouse, covering her arm even more. A revealing gesture. Helena, if anyone in my home is treating you inappropriately, I need to know. I will not tolerate any abuse under my roof. The nanny swallowed hard, her eyes now fixed on a spot on the wall behind Raphael. Thank you for your concern, sir, but I'm fine. Really? Are you sure? Because I can guarantee that everything you tell me will stay between us. My priority is the well-being of everyone who works for me. For a moment, a brief moment full of possibility, it seemed as if Helena would say something. Her lips parted slightly. Her eyes met Raphael's with unexpected intensity. But then, like a closing door, her expression returned to its carefully maintained neutrality. I'm perfectly fine, sir. If you'll excuse me, it's almost time to pick up Olivia from ballet. Raphael nodded slowly, acknowledging the invisible barrier that had risen between them. Of course you can go. Helena stood up and walked towards the door with measured steps. Before leaving, however, Raphael called out to her once more. Helen? He stopped without turning completely. My door is always open, for anything you need. An almost imperceptible tremor ran through Helena's shoulders before she nodded briefly and left the office. Raphael sat there, watching the conversation. Something was wrong. He was sure of that now. The fear in Helena's eyes was too real to ignore, but what could he do if she refused to talk? He couldn't accuse Marco without concrete evidence. The man had managed his household perfectly for years. It would be unfair and unwise to act solely on the suspicions of a little girl. However, when Raphael remembered Olivia's drawing, so simple and direct in its message, he felt a growing unease. Perhaps it was time to pay more attention to what was happening under his own roof, while he was busy building empires and closing deals. He picked up his phone and made a decision. He quickly typed a message to his personal assistant. Cancel my external appointments for the next few days. I will be working from home. Urgent family matters. What Raphael didn't know was that outside the office, in the silent hallway, Marco had watched Helena leave with calculating eyes, and that, at that precise moment, the power dynamic that had existed for years in the Allianz mansion was slowly but inexorably beginning to change. The following days brought a subtle but noticeable change to the routine at the Allianz mansion. Raphael, normally absent all week, now had breakfast with Olivia every morning. He worked from his home office, participating in video conference meetings and reviewing documents sent by his assistants. The boss's constant presence caused a wave of tension among the employees, accustomed to the freedom his absence afforded them. No one seemed more affected by this change than Marco. The janitor, always so self-assured, now walked the corridors with remarkable alertness, as if he feared the walls might hear his brief orders to his subordinates. "Do you plan on staying home for a long time?" Marco asked one morning, while serving Raphael coffee on the terrace. "I've realized that I've been neglecting certain aspects of my family life," Raphael replied, without taking his eyes off the tablet where he was reading financial news. "Olivia is growing up fast. I need to be more present." Marco nodded, his face a mask of cordiality. "Certainly, sir. Miss Olivia must be delighted." "Yes, it is. And it's been enlightening to see how things work around here in my absence." Marco's eyes registered a brief flash of concern. "I hope you're satisfied with how I've managed the house. I've always tried to keep everything spotless." Finally, Raphael looked up to meet the janitor's gaze. "Perfection has many faces, Marco. Sometimes what seems flawless on the surface hides deep cracks." An almost palpable tension settled between the two men. Mark was the first to look away, quickly regaining his composure. "If you allow me, sir, the gardeners are awaiting my instructions to prune the rose bushes." "Sure, you can go." As Raphael watched Marco stiffly walk away, he reflected on the changes he had noticed in the past few days. The way the employees seemed to relax when Marco was away, the furtive glances exchanged between the kitchen staff, the sudden silence that fell over any conversation when the janitor entered a room. Helena, in particular, seemed to live in a state of constant alert. Raphael had observed her interacting naturally with Olivia, smiling and chatting animatedly when they were alone. However, as soon as Marco approached, the nanny would adopt an almost mechanical posture, responding only to what was strictly necessary, avoiding any eye contact. That afternoon, Raphael decided to take the next step in his silent investigation. Taking advantage of Marco's absence while he was running errands in the city, he called Victor, the young driver who had only been working for the family for a few months. "Victor, sit down," Raphael invited, pointing to the chair in his office. The boy obeyed, visibly nervous to be alone with his boss. "I'm concerned about something that might be going on at my house," Raphael began, keeping his tone casual. "I'd like to hear your honest opinion, as someone relatively new here. How would you describe the work environment at the mansion?" Victor hesitated, running a hand through his dark hair. "It's good work, sir. I'm very grateful for the opportunity." "I wasn't asking you about gratitude, Victor. I was asking you about the environment." The driver swallowed hard, glancing briefly at the door as if afraid someone might be listening. "It's a challenge sometimes. There are so many rules, so many high expectations." "Imposed by whom?" "Mainly because of Mr. Marco," Victor replied, lowering his voice instinctively. "He's very demanding." Raphael leaned forward. "Asking how?" Victor looked increasingly uncomfortable. "He makes sure everything works perfectly, sir. No one can make mistakes." "And what happens when someone makes a mistake?" The silence that followed was more eloquent than any answer. Victor looked away, staring at his own hands. "Victor, now I need you to be honest with me. What happens when Marco dislikes someone?" "It depends on the employee, sir," the driver finally replied, his voice barely a whisper. "Some get warnings. Others are put on more difficult jobs with impossible schedules. Some simply disappear. They say they're transferred to other properties. And Helena, how does Mark treat her?" Victor visibly paled. "Sir, I really don't know if I should. I'm asking you to tell me, Victor. It's important." The driver took a deep breath. "Helena is a special case. She takes care of Miss Olivia, so she has a certain status. But for some reason, Marco seems resentful of her. I've heard rumors that she tried to report him once for the way he treated one of the maids. Since then—" He stopped, as if he had said too much. "Continue," Raphael insisted. "Since then, he's kept her close, always under surveillance. It's as if he's waiting for her to make a mistake serious enough to warrant firing her. But since Miss Olivia adores her, he can't just fire her." Raphael felt a chilling sense of understanding run through his chest. And the marks on your arm? Do you know how they appeared? Victor shook his head. I haven't seen anything directly, sir, but there are rumors. The employees say that Marco intercepted her in the service corridor after she questioned one of the punishments he gave to Fiona, the youngest cleaning lady. Did he assault her? Raphael's voice took on a dangerous tone. No one saw it, sir. But Helena showed up the next day with her injured arm and asked Chiara, the cook, for some herbs for compresses. She said she had knocked on a door, but no one believed her. Raphael leaned back in his chair, processing the information. A terrifying pattern was beginning to form in his mind. Why didn't anyone contact me? Why didn't anyone report this? Victor let out a humorless laugh. With all due respect, sir, who would believe it? Marco has been here for over 10 years. He's your trusted man. We're disposable. The truth of those words hit Raphael like a physical blow. In his pursuit of business expansion, he had completely delegated control of his home, unwittingly creating a small kingdom where Marco reigned in fear. That will change, Victor. You have my word. The driver nodded, though his eyes betrayed skepticism. Can I leave now, sir? Yes, you can go, and Victor, thank you for your honesty. Alone again, Raphael walked to his office window, gazing out over the meticulously manicured grounds of the estate. Beneath the perfect beauty of that surface, he now knew there was a much darker reality. What else had he ignored while building his empire? His cell phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Theo Müller, his oldest business partner. Raphael, we need to talk about the Northeast contract. The shareholders are worried about your sudden departure. There are rumors circulating. I'm dealing with urgent family matters, Theo. Family? The surprise in Theo's voice was palpable. I thought your family life consisted of bank transfers to expensive schools. Since when do you care? Watch your tone, Raphael interrupted coldly. I'll be in the office tomorrow for the board meeting. Until then, keep the shareholders at bay. As the call ended, Raphael felt the weight of multiple responsibilities on his shoulders. On one hand, there was the company, the contracts, the employees who depended on his decisions. On the other, there was the painful revelation that his own home, the place that should have been a refuge, had become a territory of fear and abuse under his neglectful gaze. As he pondered his next steps, he heard laughter coming from the garden. Approaching the window, he saw Olivia and Helena sitting under the old tree, apparently engaged in some kind of game or mischief. His daughter's face lit up with a genuine smile, while Helena, momentarily free from Marco's watchful gaze, looked years younger, and her own smile revealed a beauty that Raphael had never noticed before. It was, at that moment, that an idea began to emerge from his head. A risky idea, one that could cost him dearly, but which could be the only way to correct the imbalance that had allowed itself to take hold. Raphael picked up the phone again, this time to call Aaron, his personal lawyer and lifelong friend. Aaron, I need you to check something for me in complete discretion. I want to know if there are any records of complaints, formal or informal, against an employee of mine named Marco Lehman. Check with every possible authority, the police, the Ministry of Labor, everything. This is unusual, Raphael, Aaron commented. Any particular problems? Just do what I asked. And Aaron, maximum urgency and discretion. I don't want anyone, absolutely no one but you, to know about this investigation. After the call ended, Raphael made another decision. He opened his laptop and accessed the mansion's security system. As the owner, he had access to the recordings from the cameras installed at strategic points on the property, a system that he himself rarely consulted and that he entrusted to Marco to supervise. He began reviewing the recordings from the past few days, focusing especially on the service corridors and employee common areas. If there was a pattern of abuse, he would find evidence. And if he found it, the sound of the office door opening broke his concentration. Olivia came running in, her hair a little disheveled from playing in the garden. Dad, have you seen this? Helena is teaching me how to make flower crowns. Look what we made for you. In her small hands, Olivia held a simple wreath braided with flowers from the garden. Raphael smiled and discreetly closed his laptop. It's beautiful, Princess. You two are very talented. Helena said she learned it from her mother when she was little. She lived in the country, you know. There were lots of flowers there. Olivia set the wreath down on the table, adjusting it carefully. Dad, did you talk to Helena about, you know? Raphael hesitated, aware of the complexity of the situation. "I'll take care of it, Olivia, I promise." "Do you want to send Marco away?" the girl asked, direct as always. Before Raphael could answer, a cough at the door announced Marco's presence. The janitor stood at the office door, his face like an indecipherable mask. "Excuse the interruption, sir. I only came to inform you that I have returned from the city and that dinner will be served in an hour." His eyes lingered briefly on the wreath of flowers on the table, and a slight frown on his brow revealed his displeasure. "Thank you, Marco," Raphael replied, maintaining his composure despite the sudden tension in the air. When the janitor left, Olivia approached her father, whispering, "Always listen, Dad. It's like I have eyes and ears everywhere." Raphael hugged his daughter, feeling a renewed determination grow within him. "Not for much longer, Princess. I promise." What Raphael didn't know was that his conversation with Victor hadn't gone unnoticed, and that, at that precise moment, Marco was already beginning to articulate his own defense strategy, one that involved discrediting Helena and ensuring that whatever the outcome of that silent battle, she would be the only one who would lose. The Allianz Company's board meeting unfolded exactly as Raphael had predicted. Tense faces around the long mahogany table, veiled questions about his recent absence, insinuations about his leadership skills. Theo Müller, in particular, seemed determined to turn Raphael's domestic situation into a corporate problem. "Our investors are concerned about your sudden change in priorities," Theo commented as the other board members filed out of the room after the meeting. "Dedicating yourself to family life is admirable, Raphael, but this is a delicate time. The market is watching our every move." Raphael methodically organized the papers in front of him, maintaining the calculated calm that had made him famous in the business world. "My leadership ability is not in question, Theo. The numbers speak for themselves." "The numbers, yes, but the perception—" Theo adjusted his thin-rimmed glasses, choosing his words carefully. "There are rumors circulating about problems with your domestic staff, something to do with your nanny." Raphael froze for a moment. "How did you know?" A faint smile spread across Theo's face. "It's a small world, my friend, especially for men like us. Apparently, your caretaker, Marco, contacted my assistant, quite concerned about irregularities at your mansion. Did Marco contact you?" Raphael's voice took on a dangerously calm tone. "Indirectly, yes. Apparently he fears that an employee is manipulating you. Something about unfounded accusations, inappropriate behavior on his part with little Olivia." Raphael stood up abruptly. "This is an unacceptable invasion of my privacy, Theo. Marco works for me, not the board, and what happens in my house is none of this company's business." "Normally I would agree with you." Theo stood up too, adjusting his expensive suit. "But when these matters affect your judgment, and by extension the value of our shares, well, it becomes a collective interest. Are you threatening me?" "I advise you, Raphael, as a longtime friend and business partner, resolve this situation quickly, preferably by firing this problematic employee before it becomes a bigger scandal. It seems Marco has some pretty incriminating evidence." Raphael felt a wave of fury rise inside him, but decades of self-control had prevented him from showing it. "Thanks for the advice, Theo. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an important call." As soon as he found himself alone in the meeting room, Raphael picked up the phone and quickly dialed Aaron's number. "I need you to expedite the investigation I requested of you, and I want you to add a name to the list. Theo Müller. Check if there is any connection between him and Marco." "Raphael, this goes beyond what we've discussed," Aaron replied, clearly surprised. "Investigating your own partner." "Do as I ask, Aaron. And I want results today." As he drove back to the mansion, Raphael tried to comprehend the extent of the web Marco had woven around him. The caretaker had clearly anticipated his moves and had acted quickly to create an alternative narrative, one where Helena was the manipulative villain and he was the wronged victim. Upon arriving home, Raphael went straight to Olivia, who was playing in the playroom under Helena's supervision. The contrast between the corporate environment he had just left and the domestic scene before him could not have been more striking. Here there was no pretense, just the genuine laughter of his daughter as she assembled a giant puzzle on the floor. "Dad, come help us!" Olivia shouted when she saw him. Helena stood up immediately, her smile fading as she noticed Raphael's serious expression. "Good afternoon, sir. Miss Olivia has finished all her homework. We were just— It's okay, Helena, Raphael interrupted gently. In fact, I'd like to speak to you privately if possible. A shadow of apprehension crossed the nurse's face. That's it, sir. I want to go too, Olivia protested. Raphael bent down to his daughter's height. Princess, I need to talk to Helena about adult matters. Why don't you continue with the puzzle? We'll be right back. Reluctantly, Olivia agreed, returning her attention to the colorful pieces scattered across the carpet. Raphael led Helena to the side balcony of the mansion, a space rarely frequented by the domestic staff, making sure they were away from prying ears. He noticed how the nanny kept a calculated distance, her arms crossed in front of her body as if for protection. Helena, I have to be direct with you, Raphael began. I've discovered that Marco has been causing problems for several employees here. I have reason to believe that he targeted you specifically. Helena turned pale but remained silent, her eyes fixed on some distant point in the garden. I've also discovered, Raphael continued, that he's now trying to discredit her by spreading rumors about her behavior. Apparently he has evidence of some kind. Evidence? Helena's voice faltered. What kind of evidence? I'm not entirely sure, but I want you to understand something very important. I'm on your side in this situation. I believe in you, not him. And we'll figure this out. Helena's eyes finally met Raphael's, shining with suppressed tears. Why? Why do you believe me and not him? He's worked for you for much longer. Raphael sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because I trust my daughter's judgment, and because I've finally started paying attention to what goes on under my own roof. I saw how the other employees react to Marco's presence, the fear in their eyes. I saw the marks on his arm. And most importantly, I listened to the witnesses. Helena seemed momentarily stunned. Testimonies. I've spoken to several members of the team in recent days. Discreetly. They've all told similar stories about Marco's regime. The constant fear, the veiled threats, the retaliation when anyone challenges him. Raphael took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Why didn't you tell me, Helena? Why did you keep quiet? A sad smile crossed his face. Do you really have to ask? Who am I compared to him? A simple nanny, easily replaceable. Marco is his right-hand man, the man who keeps the house running while he builds his empire. Who would believe me? The raw honesty of his words hit Raphael like a physical blow. I would have believed him, if I had paid more attention. You were busy, Helena replied, without accusation in her voice, simply stating a fact. Yes, it was. Raphael moved closer to the balcony railing, watching the sun begin to set on the horizon. Too busy making a fortune to realize the kind of man I had put in charge of my home, too busy to realize the suffering I have right under my nose. He turned to look at her again. But that ends now, Helena. Today, I will say goodbye to Marco. Panic took over Helena's face. No, you can't do this. His reaction surprised Raphael. Why not? Because— Helena hesitated, as if carefully measuring her words. Because he won't accept being fired without retaliation. And I'm not the only one who will suffer the consequences. I have a daughter, sir. A daughter, Raphael couldn't hide his surprise. In 3 years, Helena had never mentioned having a daughter. Yes, Anna. She's 7 years old and lives with my mother in the country. It's for her that I put up with all this. Helena took a deep breath as if gathering the courage to continue. Marco knows himself. When I tried to report how he treated Fiona, the youngest maid, he made it clear that he knew where my daughter studied, the route she took every day. He said he had contacts everywhere. Raphael felt a wave of anger rise inside him. Did he threaten his daughter? Not directly. Marco is more subtle than that, but the message was clear. That's why you kept quiet, that's why you endured the abuse. Helena nodded, tears finally streaming down her face. Anything to protect Anna. Raphael stepped forward and, with an impulsive gesture, took Helena's hands. Listen to me carefully, I'll take care of this. I'll make sure you and your daughter are okay, you have my word. Helena's eyes, moist and vulnerable, met Raphael's with unexpected intensity. For a brief moment, something more than gratitude passed between them. A connection that transcended the employer-employee relationship, something more human, deeper. The moment was interrupted by the sound of the balcony door opening. Mark was at the door, his face a mask of professional courtesy, but his eyes burned with almost contained fury as he watched Raphael's hand still holding Helena's. "Excuse me for interrupting, sir," Marco said in a controlled voice. "Mr. Müller is on the phone. He says it's urgent." Helena quickly removed her hands from Raphael's, taking a step back. The fear in her eyes was palpable. "Tell him I'll be back later," Raphael replied, without taking his eyes off the concierge. "He was quite insistent, sir. He mentioned something about important evidence that he needs to discuss with you." Raphael felt a growing unease. The mention of evidence seemed to confirm that Marco was, in fact, building some kind of accusation against Helena. "Very well. I'll see you in the office." Turning to Helena, he added in a softer voice, "We'll continue the conversation later. Please check to see if Olivia has finished the puzzle." Helena nodded silently and headed for the door, trying to keep as much distance as possible from Marco as he passed by. When they were alone, Raphael faced the janitor directly. "Marco, I want you to prepare your transition report. As of tomorrow, we will no longer need your services." If the news surprised Marco, he didn't show it. His face remained impassive, only a slight raise of an eyebrow revealing any reaction. "May I ask the reason, sir? After so many years of loyal service, I think you know perfectly well why," Raphael replied coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to answer the call you so conveniently mentioned." Mark bowed his head slightly in a gesture of feigned submission. "As you wish, sir. I would just like to warn you that not everything is what it seems. Some people are masters of manipulation." "I know perfectly well, Marco, more than you think." Raphael stepped out onto the balcony, feeling strangely relieved to finally have confronted the janitor. However, a sense of apprehension lingered. What exactly was Marco up to with Theo? What kind of evidence did he claim to have? Entering his office, Raphael picked up the phone, preparing for another battle, this time with the man he considered his best friend in the business world. What he didn't know was that this would be just the first of many battles he would have to fight in the days to come, and that the price of the truth could be higher than he imagined. The call with Theo was exactly what Raphael expected, a mix of feigned concern and veiled threats. His former partner insisted on helping him see the blatant manipulation he was suffering at the hands of a simple employee. When Raphael stood firm in his decision to fire Marco, Theo finally revealed his attitude. "I have a rather compromising video in my possession, Raphael. Your janitor sent it to you as collateral in case something unfortunate happens to him." "What kind of video?" Raphael's voice was controlled, but his fist clenched tightly against the table. "A recording of your nanny admitting to having an inappropriate relationship with you. Quite explicit, I must say. I can imagine the scandal if this were leaked to the press, especially considering the delicate timing of negotiations with foreign investors." Raphael felt his blood run cold. "That's a blatant lie, Theo. There was never anything between Helena and me." The video suggests otherwise, and unfortunately in the digital age, perception often prevails over reality. Japanese investors are particularly sensitive to moral scandals, as you well know. "Are you blackmailing me, Theo? After 20 years of collaboration?" A theatrical sigh echoed through the phone. "Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer to think I'm protecting the company's interests." "Our interests. Just fire the young woman discreetly, keep Marco in charge, and this little inconvenience will go away." Raphael hung up the phone without answering, his anger boiling. Marco had crossed all limits by falsifying evidence against Helena and manipulating Theo to pressure Raphael. It was a calculated move, perfectly exploiting the vulnerabilities of the moment. The newly signed multi-million-dollar contract, the nervous foreign investors, the impeccable reputation Raphael had built over decades. His phone rang again almost immediately. It was Aaron. "I have the information you asked for, Raphael, and some of it is disturbing." Forward. "Marco Liman has an interesting story. Before working for you, he was fired from 3 other high-end establishments, always under murky circumstances. In one case, there was a formal complaint for harassment, but the victim suddenly withdrew the complaint." "And what about the connection with Theo?" Aaron hesitated. "This is where things get complicated. I've discovered regular bank transfers from Theo's personal account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, and from that offshore account to an account in the name of Pietro Lehman, Marco's brother. Raphael felt as if the ground had disappeared from under his feet. Are Theo and Marco connected financially? How long ago? From what I've been able to track down, approximately 8 years. The transfers began shortly after Marco started working for you. The revelation hit Raphael like a physical blow. For nearly a decade, he had had Theo's informant inside his home. Marco was not just an abusive caregiver. He was a spy planted by his supposedly trusted partner. There's more, Raphael. About the nanny, Helena. In fact, she tried to report Marco 2 years ago, not only for harassment against her, but for a plan to embezzle money from the mansion's accounts. The report was mysteriously dismissed, and shortly after, records of threats he received began to surface. Documented threats? Yes, he was smart enough to record some conversations, save messages. But it seems Marco discovered his daughters and, well, you can imagine the rest. Raphael took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts amid the avalanche of revelations. Aaron, I need you to compile everything into a detailed dossier, and I want you to hire private security for a girl named Anna in the countryside. She's Helena's daughter. Maximum discretion. It's been resolved. And what about that video Theo mentioned? It must be manipulation, probably using footage from the mansion's security cameras to which Marco had full access. Raphael paused, thinking quickly. I'll need an expert in video analysis, someone who can prove the manipulation. I know the right person, but Raphael, be careful. From what I understand, Marco is not the kind of man who accepts defeat. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent knock on the office door. Helena entered, pale as a ghost. Sir, forgive the intrusion, but Olivia has disappeared. Raphael jumped. What do you mean it's gone? We were finishing the puzzle and she said she was going to get water in the kitchen. When I realized it was taking too long and went to get it, I couldn't find it anywhere. Fear gripped Raphael. Have you looked in the garden, his room? Yes, sir. The whole team is looking. Helena wrung her hands nervously. And there's something else. Marco has also disappeared. The implication hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible. Raphael immediately activated the mansion's security system on his computer, checking the cameras. There, Helena pointed, indicating one of the screens that showed the boundary of the back of the property. That's his shelter. Raphael zoomed in. Olivia was walking through the back garden, following Marco, who was gesturing excitedly as he spoke. They were heading towards the small house adjacent to the property, where the caretaker had his personal office. Let's go, Raphael ordered, standing up. Now. Together they ran through the halls of the mansion, ignoring the surprised looks of the other employees. As they reached the back garden, they saw Marco's front door closing in the distance. Wait here, Raphael ordered. No, Helena replied with surprising firmness. I'll go with you. Olivia trusts me. Raphael hesitated for just a second before nodding. They cautiously approached the small stone building. Through the half-open window, they could hear Marco's voice, soft and persuasive. They're deceiving your father, Miss Olivia. Helena is not who he thinks she is. I have proof that she's manipulating you both to get money. That's a lie, Olivia's indignant voice said clearly. Helena would never do that. You're the one who hurts people. Mark sighed deeply. I see that it has poisoned your mind too. That's why I have to show you first. Look at these images. Raphael felt his blood run cold. Marco was showing Olivia the doctored video. I don't understand, said the girl's confused voice. Why does Helena say these things? She would never talk like that. Exactly, honey, because she's not really talking. It's a trap, Raphael interrupted, forcing the door open and entering the room with Helena right behind him. Mark stood up abruptly and closed the laptop he was showing the girl. Raphael, what a coincidence. I was just telling your daughter how you're being manipulated. The only manipulation here is yours, Marco. Raphael kept his voice controlled, despite the fury he felt. Olivia, come here. The girl ran to her father's side, hugging him around the waist. Helena stood a few steps back, clearly tense. Mark smiled, with an almost supernatural calm. I see you brought your private lover to the confrontation. How touching. Choose your words very carefully, Marco. I know about your connections with Theo. I know about the money he's been paying your brother for 8 years. I know about the complaints that were mysteriously dismissed. For the first time, Marco's mask of control trembled slightly. An impressive investigation, but that doesn't change the fact that I have compromising evidence that could destroy your reputation, and by extension, the value of your company. Fragmented evidence, Raphael replied. Crude manipulations that any video analysis expert could expose in a matter of hours. Maybe, but the damage will be done by the time the press publishes it. I can imagine the headlines. Business tycoon involved with his daughter's nanny. The tabloids will love it. Olivia looked around the adults, confused and scared. Helena took a step forward, surprising everyone. Why, Marco? Why this obsession with destroying me? The janitor turned his icy gaze on her. Because you tried to expose me. You tried to ruin everything I built. Years of working to gain Raphael's trust, positioning myself strategically, reporting every move to Theo. He stopped abruptly, realizing he had revealed too much. Raphael narrowed his eyes. So, that's it. You were Theo's informant, the spy inside my house, passing on information about my business, my plans, my strategies. Mark regained his composure, adjusting his jacket meticulously. Business is business, Raphael. It's nothing personal. Theo simply values loyalty more. And you value money above all else, even above the basic dignity of the people under your supervision. A cold smile spread across the concierge's face. Everyone has their price, even your precious Helena. What do you mean by that? Raphael asked, feeling a growing unease. Marco walked slowly to his filing cabinet, from which he took out a folder. Tell him, Helena. Tell him about the deal we made when I discovered you were investigating the mansion's accounts. Helena visibly paled. Raphael turned to her, questioning her. Helena hesitated, her voice almost a whisper. When I discovered the irregularities in the accounts, the systematic embezzlement, Marco offered me a deal. He would donate part of the money for my mother's medical treatment, since she was ill at the time, if I kept quiet. And did you accept? The shame on Helena's face was evident. For a while, yes. My mother needed the operation urgently, but then I couldn't take it anymore. That's when I tried to formally report him, and he discovered Anna's. Marco clapped slowly, sarcastically. What a touching story. You just left out the part where you continued to receive the money even after your mother recovered, or how you used your position of trust to access confidential documents from Raphael's office. That's a lie, Helena exclaimed. Really? Marco handed him some papers from the folder. These are records of access to the office during the times Raphael was not home, and these are the monthly transfers to his secondary bank account. Hardly a nanny's salary, don't you think, Raphael? Raphael picked up the documents and quickly examined them. His face remained impenetrable as he scanned the seemingly concrete evidence against Helena. Dad, Olivia's soft voice broke the tense silence. Helena wouldn't do that. She likes us a lot, I know. The simplicity of Olivia's statement contrasted sharply with the complexity of the situation. Raphael looked at his daughter, then at Helena, whose eyes were now overflowing with silent tears, and finally at Marco, whose expression showed barely concealed triumph. You know what? Raphael finally said, folding the documents carefully. There's one thing you've never understood about me. And what would that be? Marco asked with almost concealed contempt. I never make hasty decisions. I never act impulsively, and above all, I always check my sources. Raphael took his cell phone out of his pocket. While you were busy trying to manipulate my daughter, I was listening to something very interesting that Aaron sent me. A recording of you and Theo discussing exactly how you would fabricate this evidence against Helena. Marco's face lost all color. Impossible. This recording doesn't exist. Raphael pressed the play button. Theo's voice rang out clearly. Remember, Marco, the transfers must appear to come from your account. Raphael can't suspect it was us. When he's finished and gone, you'll receive your bonus, as we agreed. Helena covered her mouth with her hands, surprised. Olivia clung even tighter to her father's waist. And Marco seemed to have aged 10 years in seconds. It's over, Marco, Raphael declared, putting the phone away. Aaron has already given copies of this recording and all the documentation about his plans to the authorities. As for the manipulated video, experts are already analyzing it and discovering the fraud. And at this very moment, private security agents are guaranteeing the protection of Helena's daughter against any attempt to intimidate her or Theo. You don't understand, Marco stammered, suddenly looking much smaller. Theo will destroy me if I fail. This is your problem, not mine. You now have exactly 1 hour to vacate my property. Your dismissal will be formalized tomorrow, along with a full criminal complaint for extortion, tampering with evidence, and threats. Raphael took Olivia and held out his hand to Helena. Let's go. We have nothing else to do here. As they left the small office with Marco paralyzed in shock behind them, Helena looked at Raphael with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Why did you believe me and not him? The evidence seemed so convincing. Raphael smiled slightly. Because my daughter taught me to see beyond appearances, and because for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to trust in something beyond spreadsheets and contracts. Together they returned to the mansion, the setting sun casting long shadows ahead. The battle was far from over. Theo still posed a significant threat, and the tabloids would no doubt have a blast when the scandal broke. But in that moment, with Olivia safely in his arms and Helena walking beside him, Raphael felt a certainty he hadn't experienced in a long time. Some things were worth any price. The truth was one of them. The storm came faster than Raphael had anticipated. The morning after Marco was fired, the first headlines appeared on gossip websites. Business tycoon implicated in nanny scandal. Within hours, more reputable media outlets were reporting on the apparent crisis at Allianz companies, with rumors that a compromising video implicating the CEO was circulating among executives in the sector. The company's headquarters descended into chaos. Journalists crowded the entrance, shareholders demanded explanations, and business partners sent worried emails. The share price plummeted 12% in just one day. Raphael watched everything from his office in the mansion, where he had decided to stay to protect Olivia from the harassment of the press. Aaron was constantly coming and going, bringing updates and coordinating the legal team preparing the defense against the accusations. Theo acted faster than we expected, Aaron said, setting down a stack of newspapers on the table. He got the doctored video to strategic press contacts, creating the perfect narrative, the powerful businessman abusing his position to get involved with a vulnerable employee. Raphael leafed through the tabloids with an impassive expression, even though fury boiled inside. And the video analysis? Our experts have confirmed the manipulation. In fact, it is a crude fabrication. Images of Helena in different contexts, combined with completely fabricated audio. In a court of law, it wouldn't last 5 minutes. Aaron paused, adjusting his glasses. But in the court of public opinion, the damage is already done, Raphael added. Theo knows the game well. It doesn't matter if we prove the lie later. The seed of doubt has already been planted. A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Helena entered, visibly shaken. Excuse the intrusion, sir, but I think you should see this. He offered a tablet with a video playing. It was a live interview with Marco on a popular morning show. The former janitor, impeccably dressed and with an expression of wounded dignity, explained how he had discovered the inappropriate relationship between his boss and the nanny, and how he had been fired for trying to protect little Olivia from negative influence. I worked faithfully for the Allianz family for over 10 years, Marco said, tears in his eyes. Seeing my boss, a man I deeply respected, fall under the manipulative spell of this woman was painful. But when I realized that little Olivia was being exposed to inappropriate situations, I couldn't keep quiet. The interviewer leaned forward, fascinated. And what exactly did you see, Mr. Lyman? I prefer not to go into sordid details, out of respect for the girl. But I can say that there is concrete evidence of how this woman methodically planned to seduce my boss for financial advantage. Raphael turned off the video, his face a mask of self-control. This is exactly what we expected. Marco is playing the morality card, positioning himself as the betrayed protector. Helena sat down heavily in the nearest chair, pale. This is terrible. It makes me look like some kind of predator. This is just the beginning, Aaron warned. Theo and Marco have orchestrated it perfectly. First, they attack your personal reputation, Helena. Then, when Raphael inevitably defends you, they will use it as evidence of manipulation. It's a dirty game, but it's effective. What can we do? Helena asked in a trembling voice. Raphael stood up and went to the window where he could see Olivia playing in the garden under the supervision of Victor, the chauffeur, now assigned for additional security. The sight of his daughter, oblivious to the unfolding chaos, strengthened his resolve. We will fight back, but not on their turf. We will not respond directly to the accusations. That would only give them more fuel. Instead, we will go to the root of the problem. He turned to Aaron. How are we doing with the audit of the transfers between Theo and the offshore company? We have everything documented. This is enough to, at the very least, initiate an investigation for conflict of interest and insider trading. Great. And what about Anna's safety? Raphael said to Helena. I have received confirmation that she and my mother have been moved to a safe place, Helena replied. Thank you for that. Her voice trembled. I could never have afforded this kind of protection. Raphael made a gesture of contempt. It's the least I can do, considering you're going through this because of me. It's not your fault, Helena replied. Marco and Theo have been planning this for years. No one could have foreseen it. A thick silence fell over the office, broken only by the distant sound of Olivia's laughter in the garden. Finally, Raphael had made a decision. Helena, I think it would be best if you stayed away for a while. Not so that we would believe the accusations, but for your own protection. The press is turning this into a circus, and soon they will start persecuting you personally. Helena's face showed a mixture of understanding and helplessness. Where would I go? My face is all over the newspapers. Aaron has reserved a small secluded chalet in the mountains. You'll be safe there while we resolve this situation. Victor will take you there tonight discreetly. And Anna, my daughter? As soon as it's safe, we'll arrange for her and her mother to join you. It's the best way to protect them while we fight Theo and Marco in the open. Helena hesitated, visibly conflicted. And Olivia? She'll be devastated if I suddenly disappear. I'll explain it to her as best I can. Olivia is perceptive. She'll understand that we're trying to protect you. Before Helena could answer, the office door opened again. Rose, Raphael's secretary, came running in. Sir, excuse the interruption, but Theo Muller is here. He says he needs to speak to you urgently. Raphael and Aaron exchanged meaningful glances. Let him in. Helena, you better go behind. Aaron, go with her and finish the preparations for tonight. When he was alone, Raphael adjusted his posture carefully, sitting behind the table with the studied calm of a chess player about to make a crucial move. Theo entered moments later, his confident smile contrasting with the obvious tension in his shoulders. Raphael, my friend, what a pitiful situation. Theo took a step forward as if to embrace him, but stopped when he saw the icy expression of his former companion. Spare me the false condolences, Theo. We know exactly what's going on here. Theo adjusted his tie and sat down uninvited. Really? Because from my perspective, it looks like you're in the middle of a devastating scandal that could have easily been avoided if you'd listened to my advice. Your advice? You mean your blackmail? Raphael kept his voice controlled, despite his anger. Or maybe you mean your 8-year strategy of spying on me through Marco? A brief flash of surprise crossed Theo's eyes before he regained his composure. I see you've been diligent in your research. Impressive. Not as much as his transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, or the detailed records Marco kept of confidential information from Allianz companies that coincidentally always benefited his personal investments. Theo laughed, but the sound was humorless. Business is business, Raphael. We've always been players on opposite sides of the table, even when it seemed like we were on the same team. Did you really believe all that talk about collaboration and loyalty? Indeed, yes. My mistake. Raphael leaned back in his chair. Now, why are you really here? I doubt it's to confess your crimes. Theo leaned forward, his smile fading. I've come to offer a way out, a deal that benefits both of us. I'm listening. It's simple. You temporarily resign as president of Allianz Companies, citing personal reasons. I take over as interim president. The scandal gradually dissipates, and within 6 months, you quietly return, albeit with less operational autonomy. Raphael couldn't suppress a disbelieving laugh. And why should I agree? Because the alternative is to witness the complete destruction of the legacy he built. The leaked video is just the beginning. Marco kept detailed records of, let's say, questionable decisions you made over the years. Nothing explicitly illegal, of course, but ambiguous enough to trigger endless investigations, audits, lawsuits. That's it. A corporate coup disguised as moral concern. Theo shrugged. Call it what you will. In the end, it's just a transition of power. You still keep your shares, your fortune, your reputation partially intact. I gain the control I've always deserved. Everyone wins. And Helena and the employees that Marco abused for years under his command. Collateral damage, unfortunately, but I can assure you that your nanny will receive generous compensation for the inconvenience, as long as she signs a confidentiality agreement, of course. Raphael looked at the man in front of him, the partner who had helped build an empire, the friend with whom he had shared countless dinners and celebrations. How had he not noticed the corrosive ambition that had always been there, disguised as loyalty? Your proposal is interesting, Theo. It really is. Raphael opened the desk drawer and took out a folder. But I have a counter-proposal. Theo raised his eyebrows, curious. What would it be? Raphael pushed the folder at him. Your immediate resignation from the board, the transfer of your shares to a neutral fund, a confidentiality agreement that will prevent you from mentioning any aspect of the internal operations of Allianz companies for the rest of your life. Theo laughed out loud. And why should I accept something so absurd? Because that's the alternative. Raphael passed another folder to Theo. A formal complaint to the authorities detailing your scheme of corporate espionage, market manipulation using illegally obtained inside information, and attempted blackmail using fabricated evidence. Aaron has already set it all up. One phone call from me and your life as you know it ends today. Theo's face turned pale as he flipped through the documents. That would also make you lose control. Stocks plummet, investors flee, the empire we built collapses. Maybe so, but unlike you, Theo, I have recently learned that there are more important things than money or power. Raphael stood, asserting his presence. I have a daughter to raise, employees who trust me, and an innocent woman whose reputation you tried to destroy out of pure ambition. I am willing to rebuild from the ashes if necessary. The two men stared at each other in silence for long moments, the air between them charged with decades of shared history and a newly discovered betrayal. You have until tomorrow to decide, Raphael concluded, heading for the door. Choose wisely. After Theo left, visibly shaken, Raphael allowed himself a moment of exhaustion. The battle was far from over, and the costs, personal, financial, emotional, were already immense. His phone vibrated with a message from Helena. All set for tonight. Can I see Olivia before I leave? The simplicity of the request touched something very deep within Raphael. Amidst all the chaos, Helena's main concern remained the well-being of her daughter. That's all, he replied. She'll want to say goodbye. He put the phone aside and walked to the window, watching the sun begin to set. One chapter of his life was clearly ending, but the next was still a blank page. One thing was certain, though. For the first time in many years, his decisions would not be guided solely by profit or expansion, but by something much more fundamental. The truth, no matter how painful, was the only path to redemption. 3 months had passed. In Helena and Anna's new house, in a distant coastal town, the phone rang. Mr. Allianz, Helena said, surprised. How are things going? Theo signed the agreement yesterday. Marco will face justice. As for Allianz companies, we are implementing a comprehensive anti-harassment program. And Olivia. Raphael smiled on the other end of the line. Ask about you every day. In fact, we're packing to go visit them, if everything goes well. That's right, Helena replied, looking at Anna playing in the sand through the window. That boy's drawing not only saved one life, it transformed many. Raphael's empire now had a more solid foundation, not in marble and glass, but in compassion and justice. Sometimes it takes the pure gaze of a child to show us the true meaning of strength. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope you have been deeply touched by the journey of Raphael, Helena, Olivia, and Anna. This story about looking beyond appearances and having the courage to stand up for the truth reminds us that the most meaningful transformations often begin with a simple act of perception and compassion.